Based on another poll I've done, the majority of votes wanted to see the similarities and differences between the Dimitrescu daughters. They're one of my favorite topics, so I apologize in advance if I ramble. As always, I will also warn you that while a lot of these will be canon information, some will be headcanons or interpretations. You can disagree, but all I ask is that you're respectful. Anyway, let's start with what we know. Bela is the oldest, Cassandra is the middle child, and Daniela is the youngest. When we start with comparisons, we can see in the models that each daughter has blood around their mouths and chests, gem chokers around their necks, and the same flower-like tattoo between their brows. I like to say this is Capcom's laziness, but they all wear the same outfits as well. At the ends of their hoods, we see what looks like the Dimitrescu symbol, and each wear a flowered, lace cloak that billows behind them. Look-wise, we can see some similarities despite them not being biologically related. For example, we know that Bela has eyeshadow and mascara, as well as smudged makeup around her cheeks. Daniela almost seems to copy this in some way, likely because she's the youngest and that's just what they do. While it's a little difficult to tell with her base model, Cassandra appears to be the only one that doesn't wear any sort of eye makeup, though it's assumed she wears black lipstick like her sisters do. All three also have the same Kadu scar on the left side of their heads, though this actually varies from model to model. I have no access to mods to get my own photos of them, but based on what I could find, that removed their hoods or from glitches where their hoods are off for a moment, Bela has the biggest one, followed by Cassandra and then Daniela. I'm unsure what this means in terms of their abilities and personalities, as when I write about them, it's the opposite. Bela has the smallest, Cassandra is the middle, and Daniela has the largest, but having the biggest one meant her affinity to the Kadu was less than her sister's, causing her mental health to suffer as a result. Perhaps in-game, having a larger scar meant Bela has the most affinity to the Kadu. Maybe it means nothing and is simply a design choice. I dunno. In terms of personality, each sister can resemble another with a few voice lines. We know they're all a little playful and sadistic, and even with their flirty lines, there's a clear undertone of violence or aggression. They also all clearly look up to their mother and admire her greatly, even copying some of her mannerisms or beliefs. But as far as similarities go, I believe this is where they end. They are still different people, despite what some may try to argue. They don't look the same. For example, Bela has a rectangular face and a sharp nose, Cassandra has a square jaw and a wider nose, and Daniela has a rounder face and a button nose. They also all have different hair colors, but you can look at my video detailing their physical differences for more descriptions. Anyway, with Bela being the oldest, it's obvious that she would have more responsibilities and would take things more seriously. This is probably why she dislikes cleaning up after her sisters so much and doesn't believe she can rely on them. She takes after her mother the most, likely trying to be the favorite, and she seems very bored throughout most of her sequence. I like to assume she thought of Ethan as nothing more than a pest, and thought herself much stronger and more capable than him, which she should have been, and so was very surprised and angry when he got the drop on her. It's interesting to see how quickly her mood changes from a bored, borderline sadistic one to an angry, violent one. I suppose she could be used to having to turn that personality on to an extent when she needs to be stern or get her point across. I'm sure it was difficult getting her sisters to listen to her a lot of the time, and we even see that she highly dislikes when Ethan doesn't listen to her. Oldest sisters. Overall, Bela definitely seems like the oldest sibling. She's much more mature, more sure of herself, and she directs with ease. We don't know what their lives were really like prior to the game, but based on the sequence where we meet them for the first time, we can assume she easily leads the other two and they do follow and listen to her. So, we know she's smart and takes on a leadership role easily. But what of her sisters? Cassandra is very interesting to me. She's canonically the most sadistic of the three, but she's also the chattiest with her prey and she's pretty sarcastic and playful. That being said, around her family, she seems to be very quiet and observant. We see her standing behind Alcina during the beginning scene in the castle, quietly watching Ethan and doing as she's told. During the scenes she's not chasing Ethan around alone. It seems she often keeps her head down and observes from beneath her hood, and I have my own theories on that. I believe she canonically has a lazy eye, and while she is very capable and doesn't seem to care what other people think of her, maybe she's insecure about this one thing. She might also not want to be noticed as much. Part of her abilities as a huntress, I guess. Cassandra is also smart and capable of most things, and she's canonically the best huntress of the three. Between her observant nature and how much she can talk to distract her prey. Yeah, it makes sense. I personally don't think she cares much about what other people think, and she has few interests beyond hunting and experimenting or researching. That's probably part of the reason she just says whatever comes to mind when she's hunting Ethan and why she picks up his bloody handkerchief before she leaves the room. She knows she's capable and she's just toying with him. Her switch in personality when she's weakened comes as no surprise to me. Again, considering her hunting skills, when she knew her weakness was exposed, she began actually trying to kill Ethan instead of toying with him. I still think she should have won that fight, but I digress. I will say that it seems Cassandra may suffer a bit of middle child syndrome with the way Alcina talks to her and some of her voice lines. She talks about getting the scraps of their victims, and we all know how she was reprimanded for playing with Ethan instead of simply killing him, leading to the death of at least one of her sisters. She's observant, a sadist, and the best huntress of the daughters. But let's talk about Daniela. She happens to be my favorite, so I do apologize in advance if I ramble. Anyway, Daniela is the youngest of the three and, according to Capcom, the most delusional. We see this in her boss fight when she talks to Ethan as though he was in love with her, despite neither of them knowing each other for longer than a few hours. I've discussed this before, but to make it short, I assume this is due to her family coddling her more than they should as the baby and her romance books the fandom believes she enjoys. We know nothing of her mental state before her experiment or how it really changed who she was before, so there's a lot of unknown there. She is also the flirtiest of the three, but like her sisters, a lot of her lines have sadistic meanings behind them, some even blatantly so. Like, oh, I want to eat the cute ones right up. She wants to eat him, despite saying he's cute. Does that make sense? You're obviously entitled to your interpretations of the characters, just as I am. But I think a lot of the fandom forgets the Dimitrescus are, literal cannibals. Like, they do kill and eat people for fun. They're horrible people. I personally don't believe any of the flirting from them in this game was anything more than them trying to get his guard down or making him uneasy. But anyway, in terms of personality, Daniela is still smart and capable in her own ways, likely using her looks and flirtatiousness to her advantage. She may also be the brattiest of the three, often complaining instead of getting angry or whining at little things. Though not as outwardly dangerous, she's still very much a threat. And it's obvious she's the baby simply based on her placement in the beginning scene with all the Dimitrescus, as well as the way she's spoken to her about. Alcina goes out of her way to protect her and locks her up in an attempt to save her, and I like to think Cassandra is often the one that excuses her actions or encourages her behavior, while Bela is the bad guy and disciplines. Even with the way she talks, it's pretty obvious to me that she's the youngest, as someone who's also the baby of the family. The way she teases without a care in the world, and it almost seems like she may think she's untouchable for the sole fact her family is always there for her and to protect her. She can say and do what she wants to an extent because her family will be there for her. Is this a bad time to mention she probably didn't know her sisters were dead? Oops. Even her design bears resemblance to how a youngest sister's would be with the way she copies Bela's makeup and, in some ways, tries to be like her. But she does also take up after Cassandra in some ways with her personality, like the chattiness and saying whatever comes to her mind. It's clear she adores her sisters and looks up to them. I did also make a TikTok on this a while back, but I compared their walks. Bela has a very straight and powerful walk, and I want to say she's copying her mother on this one. Daniela, however, walks like a lady and often puts one foot in front of the other. Cassandra is a mix between them, switching between a straight walk and a more ladylike one. I didn't know why I wanted to mention that, but here we are. The only other thing I wanted to talk about were the colors of their chokers and how each one differs from the other in terms of meaning. We know that it goes in order from red to yellow to green, and while you can assume these are just their favorite colors or a stoplight system, let's look at color meanings. Typically, we tend to associate the color red with things such as anger, frustration, and violence. It can also represent power and royalty, and I think these things fit for Bela. We can see her anger with her sisters for not doing as she asks, or even frustration with those same things. We see how easily she flips the switch on her personality when she's weakened, going from a bored, casual person to an angry, violent one. In terms of personality, Here's what I've found, that if someone has a red aura or red personality, they're going to be full of physical energy, passion, and courage. Again, we don't know a lot about her outside of what we see in game, which isn't very much, but I can see her being passionate about her interests and courageous when it comes to things she doesn't want to do but needs to. I hope this is making sense. So far, based on my own interpretations of her character, I can understand how red fits her. Let's look at the color yellow. When you imagine this color, what do you think of? Happiness? Joy, and sunlight probably. Other than the happiness Cassandra gets when she's hunting or about to be, I don't quite see these colors relating to her as a person. So let's look deeper. Yellow is often associated with emotions such as joy, creativity, and wisdom, but it can also represent anxiety, jealousy, and frustration. Now, I can definitely see these ones when we expand on her personality and assume based on what we see in canon. I don't believe she's always a grumpy, hateful person, and many in the fandom believe her to be an artist of some kind. We also know she's intelligent. I can also see her being jealous, and I believe I've talked about her jealousy of her sisters in previous videos. This can also tie in with the frustration she feels at being different from them. But aside from that, yellow also has to do with self-confidence and how you see yourself, and Cassandra does appear to be a very confident person. Here's what I've found about the color yellow. If you feel yellow represents you, you may be someone who enjoys the thrill of a mental challenge and a wide variety of intellectual interests. Yellow people are also typically curious, questioning, and logical, all things I personally tend to associate with Cassandra. It seems a lot of the fandom does view her very similarly. Now, finally, let's look at green. We usually associate green with positive feelings such as health, creativity, and calmness, as well as negative feelings such as envy, immaturity, or sickness. Personally, I can see these with Daniela. I can see her creativity in what she does and how calm she can be despite the circumstances, as well as envy toward her sisters and her immaturity compared to them. It really could even just be her favorite color, since she enjoys gardening quite a bit, based on a voice line she has. And unlike the other two, I couldn't really find anything that fit with Daniela's personality. Most of what I read mentions nature and finding peace and balance within it, and honestly, I could see that with her. If during spring and summer, she prefers to remain outside as long as she can because she feels more like herself there. I did also see green can be associated with optimism, forgiveness, and hopefulness, all things I can see with her personality. But considering we all see her differently, maybe that's just me. I realize that the colors could mean nothing and are just there because they can be. But as a writer with intentional pickings of symbolism, I like to think they mean something. It makes sense. Some thought was put into their designs, even if we don't see the meanings right away. Anyway, I hope all of this made sense enough and that you can see the similarities and differences between the daughters. Remember, they are all their own people and do not, in fact, look the same, even with the design similarities. If you have anything to add or need any sort of clarification, don't hesitate to let me know. I also likely won't do a poll on what video I should do next, but I'll take the results from the previous poll and go from there. That means Donna's character essay should be up next. During these trying times, I ask that you remember to drink water and eat something. Please stay as safe as possible, and thank you so much for watching.